Hi, everyone. I'm an alcoholic and my name is Deb. First of all, Stephen, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak. And I also want to thank all of the Zoomers who are here and are allowing me to do just a little piece of service work. I pray that God will let you hear something that will lighten your path, lighten your load, and bring us all closer together. By the grace of God, and as a direct result of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have not had to pick up a drink or a drug in 37 years. I just celebrated my anniversary in July 4th is my clean date. And I can honestly say that I am living a life beyond my wildest dreams. I never, ever even knew that my life could be like this, that it could be possible. When I first came here, all I wanted was just to not drink. That was all I cared about. That was the only goal I had. And so I had no idea all of the gifts and the blessings that I would receive from being in this program. Drinking and using was killing me. It was killing me physically, emotionally, mentally, and definitely spiritually. I never believed that I was an addict or an alcoholic, that I was addicted to anything. First of all, my mom was an alcoholic, and so I was not going to be like her at all. So I decided to try drugs, which just kept me in it longer, I think. I believe that all of you here have either suffered from the disease of alcoholism or love someone who suffered from the disease of alcoholism. And so you all know the misery that comes with this disease. You all know the pain, the shame, the hurt, the desperation, all of that comes with it, that happens to us before we get here. So I don't want to give you a drunkalogue. What I can say to you is that I qualify. And I am very grateful for this program and to be sober, and for all of you who keep me sober. I would pick up a drug and use it until it used me up, is how I thought of it. But actually, it just stopped working. And so I would then move to another one and another one and another one. And my last drug of choice was alcohol. And that was the hardest one to put down. And I don't know if that's because it was last or just because it was harder. But in the meantime, I never suffered from withdrawal, so I didn't have a clue. I did not realize that I was addicted to things. So I don't want to give you a drunkalogue or a drugalogue. So what I do want to do is I want to talk about my higher power, whom I choose to call God. I hope that does not offend anyone. It is not meant to. That's just what I call the higher power of my understanding. He's not the God of my childhood. I like to call him Abba. There is a man, Brennan Manning, who was a priest. He left the priesthood to marry the love of his life. He was also an alcoholic. And he wrote a book called Abba's Child, The Cry of the Heart for Intimate Belonging. And I read that book. The definition of Abba, it's an Aramaic word for father. It's a word used to address God in a relation of personal intimacy. In other words, it means daddy. Now, my father was a minister. My mother was a minister's wife. She was a stay-at-home mom. And my father died when I was 15. And he was, to that point, really my spiritual mentor, my spiritual advisor. And in a way, because I was so young, it kind of was like God died. I lost my mooring, and I didn't have that spiritual advice. And at the same time, my mother was terrified. She'd never held a job. She had 4 children, and she used me as her support. And so she used to say to me consistently that I don't understand why God did this to us. Why did God take your father? Okay, so I'm 15 years old. All I know is that God killed my dad, whom I love dearly. So when I came to this program and you told me that I needed to trust in a higher power, well, I knew there was a God, and I knew he was out to get me. So I thought, oh, no. There's no way I'm going to trust that. Well, I started reading, and one of the chapters that I neglected the most and should have read immediately, and anyone who hasn't read it, please do, is the doctor's opinion. Because in the doctor's opinion, he tells us what our disease is, what our symptoms are physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And he explains to us this obsession that we have. So there's something I want to read from it, because this is what finally helped me to understand what being spiritual was, or how important it was. We feel that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these alcoholics than the altruistic movement now growing up above them. Altruistic, the definition is selfishness and concern for the well-being of others. Unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of their recovery. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the psychic change. Now, psychic, I looked up, and it's defined as outside of natural or scientific knowledge. It is spiritual. So what this tells me is that I can't stay sober if I'm not spiritual. I need to have a spiritual experience. So then I'm asking myself, okay, what is a spiritual experience? How do I experience that without surrendering to a power that I believe wants to destroy me? Well, that's in the big book too. I love the big book. And there's the spiritual experience or spiritual awakening. And I just want to read an excerpt from it. The personality changes sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. There is a principle, which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man or woman in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. All right, so here I am. I can't stay sober if I don't get spiritual. I have to have this spiritual experience. So I'm about 3 months sober, and I am going around to tables and I am crying. And I am telling everyone, I don't get this. I don't see how I can trust someone that I believe is out to get me. And finally, one day I'm at a table and there's a woman that shares, and she says to me, I have defined my higher power as the character George Burns in Oh God, which is a movie that some of you may know. A lot of you probably are too young to know. But at any rate, he has a wry sense of humor. He's very down to earth. He's kind and he's intelligent. And it was then that I realized, this higher power of my understanding can be completely different, completely out of the box than what I was taught as a child. It could be somebody like George Burns. And that gave me the permission to start to really look for what I needed in my higher power, for what I wanted. And then there was another woman at the table, and this was a woman who had a lot of sobriety behind her, and I really respected her. And she worked a great program. And what she said to me was, I have a higher power, and my higher power works really well. So I will offer my higher power to you. Please use him until you find one of your own. So that's where I started. I admired her. I knew that her higher power worked because she had what I wanted. And so I started out with her higher power. Now, so now I'm faced with turning things over. Well, I knew that I had to turn my disease over to the care of God because I could not manage it. There was no way. And that did work. But I was sure God still wanted me to manage my children, my finances, and my career. Because, he gave me a brain and he wants me to do these things. So at the same time, after I got sober, my children started to act out. They were 9 and 10. And by the time I had 3 years clean, my daughter had attempted suicide, and my son had to go into treatment. And I was a single mom. I was a student. I went back to school so I could support my children. And I was terrified. I was afraid my kids were going to die from this. And I felt responsible. And so I decided, I think at this point, I have to turn my children over to the care of God. And I remember asking my sister this because I felt like I had failed. I'd failed my children. So I asked her, I need to turn my kids over to God, and I hope that's okay. I felt like I was giving up. And I said, after all, they're God's children too. And my sister said to me, Deb, no, they are God's children first. And so after hearing that, I could let go. I could surrender my children to my higher power and trust that whatever happened would work out for good. It may not be good. It may not be what I want, but it would all work out because I am beginning to have faith in a higher power. So then I'm still sure that God wants me to manage my finances and my career. So after putting my daughter into a mental institution and my son into treatment, and being a single mom and not having any money, I end up having to declare bankruptcy. It just wiped me out completely. And that to me was humiliating. That was horrifying. And it was something that I never, ever thought would happen to me. And so I got to the point where I decided, you know what? I have to turn my finances over to the care of God as I understand him. I can't do it. I need help. And that's basically what this is all the way through it. I needed help and I couldn't do it. Now, as far as my career goes, I was working at IBM at the time, and they had just changed their pension plan and really ticked off a lot of people because they really cut our benefits way, way down. So there was a huge exodus. And one of my friends had interviewed for a job at Mayo Clinic. And they said to her, you know what, you just don't have the skill set. And she said, well, I know somebody who does. And would you like her name and number? And she did this because she just really wanted to screw up IBM, is what she told me. So at any rate, first time ever, this was amazing. They called me and I had a couple interviews with them. And I ended up getting, actually, it was the job of my dreams. I am an organizer. I love to organize things, and I am a project manager and a program manager. And what Mayo Clinic wanted me to do was create their project management office and all of the processes and protocols and everything that goes along with managing a project. So here, not only did I get my dream job, but I'm actually, I'm a computer and electrical engineer. I never in my life thought I would have a job that would allow me to help others. Well, I'm working on the medical record. I am actually working at a not-for-profit organization, and I am able to do something to help others. And I never thought that would happen. So I was extremely grateful for that. Now, when I started working at Mayo, I got a new sponsor. She was tough. Oh my God, she was tough. And I got to tell you that I have an unrealistic concept of what is just and what is not just. I believed in my heart that life should be fair. And so my sponsor, and of course what that meant was if I didn't like something at work, then I was going to go to my manager and tell him, or I was going to go to my manager's manager and tell them. I was going to tell everybody what for. Well, she wouldn't let me. She would send me to page 103 in the big book, where it says, after all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were only a symbol or symptom of our disease. Besides, we have to stop fighting anybody or anything. We have to. All right, so anytime I would go to her to complain and say I was going to do something about it, she would say to me, go back and read that paragraph again. We have to stop fighting anyone and anything. So because I had been around long enough at that point to know that this program works and people who are the winners give advice that works, and I had to listen to it even though I was totally against it. Well, an amazing thing happened. A few years after I kept my mouth shut, I got a promotion. And a few years after that, I got another promotion. And I got another promotion. So the bottom line is we have stopped fighting everyone and everything. That if we just can surrender ourselves to a power greater than ourselves, then we'll get not what we deserve, but what we need. And I have to say, I'm really grateful that I did not get what I deserve, because if I did, I'd be dead now. Or I'd be in an institution, or I'd be in jail. I do not deserve what I have today. And it is only by the grace of God that I have been blessed. So I am very, very grateful for that. One of the things I learned from that is to ask myself the question, what's more important, to be right or the relationship? Now, I have to tell you, I love to be right. I really do. It's my favorite thing. So it's very difficult for me. But to ask that question, what's more important, being right or the relationship, it started to make me think. And someone told me this, and I just loved it. I have to really guard my tongue. I can have a wicked tongue, and I can speak before I think. And then I do all kinds of damage, and I have to make amends, and I really hate making amends. So I have learned to bite my tongue, and I've learned to ask myself before I say anything that I feel needs to be said. I ask myself three things. First of all, does it need to be said? Second of all, does it need to be said now? And thirdly, does it need to be said by me? And after I go through those 3 questions, I usually discover that I don't need to say anything, or I don't need to say anything now, and just to let it go. So the one thing I did not think about, because I was very fortunate and I was very healthy. So I did not think about having to surrender my health to my higher power. Well, after I was sober for 15 years, I found out that I had hepatitis C since I was 19, and that it was ruining my liver. So they put me on treatment. It was one of the first ones, and it was a chemo. And I was sick for a year, and it lasted a year. It was miserable. I was miserable. And after that year, it worked. But then they tested me a month after I was done with treatment, and that it was back. It came back. And it did that when they first started working on hepatitis C. So after it was probably 8 years, I had, now I have 23 years clean, and my liver starts failing and I'm dying. And so they won't give you a liver transplant unless you can get rid of the hep C, because that will just kill the new liver. So fortunately, at that time, they had come to find out, or had created these medications that actually did work. But they made me so sick. I was so weak that I could not get out of bed. My husband had to help me get out of bed to go to the bathroom. He had to bring me back to my bed. I couldn't even lift my legs up onto the bed. He had to do that for me. And that went on for quite a few months, and I was so miserable. And I wanted to live. It was very depressing, but I wanted so badly to live that I just kept going. But then there came a point where I couldn't feel my higher power anymore. I just didn't feel like he was there. I just felt like he'd abandoned me. And here I am, all alone and trying desperately to live. I wanted to watch my grandchildren grow up. I wanted to watch them graduate from high school. I want to watch them graduate from college. I want to see them get married. I want to be there for my grandchildren, because for a lot of the time I was not there for my children. So I was talking to my sister, because this was devastating for me. And what she said to me was that, you know, Deb, at those times when we don't feel it, that's when we have to know it. So I'd like to tell you just a quick little story. It's really a Bible story. Please don't take offense. It's a story. There was this guy named Moses, okay? And Moses was someone who was a leader for the Jewish people, and they were all slaves in Egypt. So God comes to Moses and he says, Moses, you know, I want you to go to the Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. And so Moses, if I were Moses, I would be thinking, hell no, I'm not going to do that. But what he says is, you know, God, and he did have a problem. Moses stuttered. And so he said, I can't really speak well. And so he said to him, well, I'll tell you what, use your brother, take your brother Aaron along and have him speak for you. You tell him what to say and he'll speak for you. So they went and did it. They did it 3 times, and finally Pharaoh let them go. So they're headed on their way out of the city, and Pharaoh changes his mind, and he calls his army and he sends them after them. So they end up at the Red Sea, and it's real tumultuous and huge waves, and there's no way to cross this sea. and they have to get across it. And so, Moses is standing there like, okay, God, now what? You bring me up to the sea, now what? And God tells him to hold his staff out, and he does, and he parts the sea. And everybody gets through, and then he closes the sea on all these Egyptians that were chasing them. So what is the bottom line there? God told Moses to go. He didn't even tell him where. So if he can trust that much, then I got to be able to trust that my God has me, that no matter what happens, even if I die from this, which I didn't want, I will be okay. My higher power will take care of me. So one of the things then that I experienced was I had encephalopathy, which is a buildup of toxins. The liver filters out all of your toxins. And I thought I was fine. And one of the symptoms of it is that you sound like you have wet brain. You sound like you're drunk. Now, I never heard that. Everything that came out of my mouth, I was sure made perfect sense. And everyone else was like, we couldn't understand what I was saying. So finally, my husband sits me down at the table, and I think he's picking on me because he says he can't understand me. And he says to me, you need to understand, I cannot understand a word you're saying. So we go off to the hospital, and they fill me full of liquids and give me some new medication, and I'm still sick. I'm still dying, and I'm still waiting for a liver. So after a year of this, I got a call on the phone from Mayo Clinic, and they said, we have a liver for you, come on down. And I was so very grateful at first. And then I get in the car, and the fear sets in. And that's one of the biggest burdens, I think, that I have as an alcoholic, is this self-centered fear. So the fear sets in, and I'm thinking, it's really not that bad. I really think that I need to just pass on this liver and let somebody who really needs it have it, and I'll take the next one. Well, thank God I did not say that out loud. I don't know what my husband would have done. But in the meantime, I learned to trust my higher power. I learned that I can be fearful, and I can walk through the difficult times with my higher power. And after I woke up from surgery, I had immediate relief. I woke up and my liver had been working for a while, and I felt good for the first time in years. I felt good. And my husband was there when I woke up, and he looked at me and he said, oh my God, your eyes are so clear. Now, the thing about hepatitis is that it turns everything yellow. My skin was so yellow, it was brown. My eyes were so yellow and fuzzy and foggy, and it was like an instantaneous cure. It was a miraculous recovery. The surgeons were all astounded, as were all the doctors, because I left the hospital in a few days without even having to have a biopsy of my liver. That hardly ever happens. So it was the perfect fit. So waiting all this time, waiting for God to move in his time, gave me the perfect liver. And I have to tell you that the one thing about this, and this is true with all of the difficult times in my life, after going through something like this, I have an awareness. I know what it's like to be dying. I know what it's like to have a critical illness. I know what it's like to have a chronic illness. And so today I sponsor women with those problems because I know how it feels. And that's what I got from this. I mean, that is my blessing. That is, no matter what I go through, no matter how difficult it is, and I think I'm not going to make it, I do. And God makes it work out for the best for everybody. I am able to be of service. So now, after my transplant, I go home and I'm feeling better, and all of a sudden I hit a wall and I am extremely depressed and I cannot figure it out. And I am ashamed of myself because I have just been given a new life and I'm depressed. I went to 3 different outpatient treatments for this depression and I could not get rid of it. And I was just beside myself. I really didn't know what to do. So what happened is that actually a friend of my daughter's had breast cancer at the same time that I was sick, and she had been in chemotherapy, and she had written a story because she found the same thing happened to her. After she was cleared of the cancer, she went into a deep depression. And what she said, and this made so much sense to me, when I was sick, I was in denial. I didn't think anything wrong would happen. You know, I thought, everybody, you're all overreacting. It's going to be fine. And I did not process the fact that I was dying. And so once I wasn't, then my brain tried to process the fact that I was. And it took a full year to work through that. But my higher power got me through that. I got depressed, yes, and it was a battle. It was a huge battle, and it took a year. But my higher power was with me, and I didn't give up hope. I didn't give up my faith. And that's a lesson I learned from Moses. You know, you just gotta go. You don't ask where, you don't ask how, you just gotta go. So after the depression, I started looking at different ways to increase my spirituality. One of the things that I read was a book by M. Scott Peck. This is a really old book, and I don't even know if it's around anymore, but it's called The Road Less Traveled. And the very first line in that book is, "Life is difficult." And I'll tell you what, as an alcoholic, I have always believed that life should be fair, that, you know, it shouldn't be difficult. And so that was like, oh, okay, so life is difficult. So I don't know if you've heard the expression that God will never give you more than you can handle. A lot of people have. I heard it a lot. It's a misnomer. That isn't the whole sentence. God will only give you what you can handle with his help. And asking for help is a form of surrender. So, and Dr. Bob used to say to all of the newcomers, fall on your knees, either literally or figuratively, and say, God, I need help. I can't handle this myself. And when we do that, he will help us. It's when we try to fix it ourselves and, you know, mangle it all up and don't give it up. So I have learned that willingness and humility are gifts from God. So are sobriety, sanity, forgiveness, and freedom from fear. And that is probably my number one character defect, is how I react when I am trying to deny or sublimate fear, because that's when my actions come out, my character defects. So, and I read in, there's a book called Drop the Rock that I've been reading again for the 3rd time. But in it says that self-centered fear is the chief activator of our character defects. Deniers suppress these results in procrastination, overachievement, underachievement, shyness, aggression, overeating, starving oneself. So there's a plethora of things, character defects that come out when we try to stuff anger. And so what I have learned that today I have to be really aware of it. I have to know when anger is starting to hit me. And when it does, I have to be willing to do what I don't want to do. And that, to me, is very difficult, but very necessary. Because I'll tell you what, acting the way I did in the past, it didn't get me anywhere. That got me here, okay? I really need to do those things I don't want to. So I have to get vulnerable. I have to make amends to people. I have to forgive. So one of the ways that I can be aware, because when I first started feeling, it was awful. It was just awful. I had been numbing my feelings for so long that I didn't want to have anything to do with that. So I started watching my breathing. Now, when I get upset, when I get fearful, my breathing goes from a solid, like I'm not even thinking about it, to really heavy. And what I have learned is that my body reacts to fear. And if I can calm my body down, I can calm my fears. And then I do not have to act out of my character defects. So I'm learning different ways to be aware of the anger without running away from it. And I couldn't do that without my higher power. Just recently, two people that I love dearly, more than anything in the world, had an argument in front of me. And I was terrified. And it broke my heart. Now, the old me would have gotten in there, you know, all elbows and arms and fought with them also to try to make it turn out how I wanted it to. And when it was over, I would have wanted to try to make it better and to make them get along. And I prayed. I was terrified and I prayed. And I was able to, I did mention a couple times, you guys, you're never going to agree on this. So let's just walk away, And that didn't help. But I was okay. That's the thing. I love these people dearly. They're, you know, most important people in my life. And yet I was okay. And it's okay even today if they don't get along, because that's on them. That's what they have to work with, not me. And I am so grateful to God that I could do that. That's such a miracle for me. And these are the things, the gifts that I have been given. So one of the things that I have learned is that I suffer from a thinking disorder. I believe I was born with this disease. I have always had this thinking disorder, and it lets my character defects out. So I have been told, and I love this saying, is that your mind is like a bad neighborhood. Don't go there alone. And so I try not to. That's what the program does for me. That's what you all do to me. You listen to me, you feedback what works for you. You give me your experience, strength, and hope. And that's what helps me. That's what keeps me sane. There is an American philosopher. His name is William James. And he actually is referred to as the father of American psychology. He was the first person to actually teach psychology in a school. And what he said was, the art of being wise is the art of knowing what to overlook. And now to me, that means surrender. I am powerless over people, places, things, institutions. You know what? I am powerless over everything but me. And the sooner that I accept that, and the more I live with an attitude of surrender, the happier I am and the better my life is. So the only other thing that I want to add, and that is how important all of this is, how important balance is to all of this, and how important boundaries are to all of this. Because one of the things that I do is poor time management, and I allow myself to get overloaded. So I just want to talk about, just for a minute, a book that I read. It's called The Best Yes by Lisa TerKeurst. And actually the premise of the book is I have to say no to a lot of really good things in order to say yes to the best thing, to the thing my higher power wants me to be doing. And so when I look at it that way, it becomes much easier to say no, because I'm looking for that one thing, the thing that my higher power wants me to do, needs me to do, and I don't want to just keep busy. So again, I can honestly say that I am living a life beyond my wildest dreams. It is fabulous. I live in paradise as far as I'm concerned. I'm retired, yay. It's just been a very wonderful life. I am beginning to get healthy. This year was the first year that I could do a lot of the things that I used to be able to do before: bike riding, kayaking. I just went out to Wyoming and went climbing in the Rocky Mountains. Not real severe climbing, but a little bit of climbing on the rocks and boulders. And I feel so good about that and so grateful to my higher power. So what I've learned to do is to do the footwork and let the outcome go. And that I leave up to my higher power. I want to leave you just with this. It's actually a refrain from a song written by Laura Story, and it's called Promises. And this is how I look at my difficulties in life now. Because what if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you're near? And what if trials of this life are your mercies in disguise? And that's what I have learned about the trials in my life. They have always taught me something, and they have always given me something that I can hang on to and that I can give to others. So thanks for letting me share and for listening to me for an hour. I hope you enjoyed meeting my higher power. And I just want to say to you that if you don't have one yet, use mine, because he works until you get one of your own. Thanks.